a machine built on impossible dreams. It began with a question no one knew how to answer. What if a car could transcend the limits that engineers had quietly accepted for decades? What if a machine could merge speed, efficiency, durability, and beauty into one seamless form? Even when every formula said it couldn't be done, most dismissed the idea as fantasy. But a small group refused to let the impossible stay impossible. Today, the car is remembered as a legend, one of the rare creations that felt less like a product and more like a breakthrough. But to understand its story, we must return to the moment when hope collided with harsh reality, when a vision so bold threatened collapse under the weight of the world's expectations. The project started inside a struggling division desperate to prove its worth. Sales were falling, budgets were shrinking, morale was fading. Executives demanded something extraordinary, something capable of restoring confidence and rekindling excitement. But extraordinary ideas cost money, and the division had almost none. This contradiction set the stage for one of the most daring engineering gambles in automotive history. The team began with sketches, dreamlike shapes that violated aerodynamic norms yet evoked a sense of motion even at rest. They imagined an engine platform light enough for efficiency, yet strong enough to deliver exhilarating performance. They envisioned materials that were rare, untested, or too expensive for mainstream production. Every idea clashed with every constraint. And still, the dream persisted. Initial prototypes were disasters. Frames twisted under stress. Engines overheated. Wind tunnel tests revealed turbulence where there should have been harmony. Executives grew impatient. Critics predicted failure. Some members of the engineering team quietly transferred to safer projects, unwilling to stake their careers on an idea that seemed destined to fail. But those who remained carried a stubborn optimism. They believed in the machine even when data didn't. They redesigned the intake system from scratch. They reimagined the exhaust routing to reduce thermal strain. They experimented with composite blends that had never been used in production vehicles. The process was slow, painful, and expensive, yet each setback revealed a clue, an insight that guided them closer to the impossible. Then came a breakthrough. A young aerodynamicist discovered a shaping technique that allowed airflow to cling to the body differently than traditional designs predicted. It reduced drag, improved cooling, and stabilized the chassis at high speeds. The breakthrough wasn't flashy. It wasn't headline-worthy, but it unlocked the project potential, breathing life back into a machine that had nearly been abandoned. Still, the path ahead was filled with obstacles. Funding remained tight, pressure mounted, and the world outside continued believing the project was a waste of time. The dream was alive, but was fragile, held together by determination, ingenuity, and the thin hope that the next discovery would finally turn the impossible into reality. Progress accelerated, but so did the challenges. Every solution revealed another flaw hidden beneath the surface. The improved airflow exposed weaknesses in the cooling channels. The composite materials, while lightweight and strong, reacted unpredictably under prolonged heat cycles. Even the newly designed suspension, engineered to complement the car's radical shape, struggled to maintain stability during aggressive maneuvers. It seemed that each victory demanded a sacrifice somewhere else. Yet the team refused a break. They split into small units, each focused on a single component of the machine's evolving identity. One group refined the engine block, shaving unnecessary mass while compromising strength. Another completely restructured the thermal management system, inventing a method to siphon heat away from areas no traditional design could reach. A third group focused on the frame, studying how microflex patterns could either support or sabotage the car at extreme speeds. Despite the progress, executives became increasingly anxious. Costs were rising. Deadlines were slipping. Reports circulated accusing the team of chasing dreams instead of delivering a product. Some leaders pushed to cancel the project outright, arguing that the company needed stability, not a long-shot miracle. But the chief engineer fought fiercely to keep it alive. He reminded the board that innovation rarely emerged from calculated safety. Sometimes, it grew from desperation and boldness, from the willingness to risk everything for a breakthrough. The engineers pressed on, testing prototype after prototype. They endured long nights, failures, and a growing fear that the world would never understand how close they were to something extraordinary. Then, during a high-speed stability trial, the machine delivered a moment they would never forget. The car cut through the air with a purity none of the previous versions had achieved. It held its line through corners with an elegance that felt more organic than mechanical. When the driver returned to the pit, he stepped out in stunned silence before whispering a single sentence. For the first time, it feels real. The data confirmed his reaction. Drag coefficients dropped. Cooling efficiency soared. Structural stress points aligned perfectly across the frame. The impossible was no longer a distant dream. It was taking shape in front of them. But the breakthrough also exposed the next looming conflict. Public expectations. Rumors of the project leaked. Enthusiasts speculated. Journalists demanded details. Pressure swelled around a machine that wasn't ready for the spotlight. As attention grew, so did internal politics. Departments outside the project questioned its priority. Marketing teams demanded features that would complicate production. Accountants pushed for cheaper materials. The engineers knew that surrendering to these demands risked dismantling the balance they had fought so hard to achieve. The machine wasn't a puzzle of interchangeable pieces. It was a delicate ecosystem. Change one part, and the whole vision could collapse. The tension reached its peak when a senior executive proposed a drastic redesign to modernize the car's appearance. The team pushed back, arguing that even minor aesthetic changes would disrupt the airflow harmony that defined the machine's identity. For the first time, the project stood in open conflict with leadership. The engineers gathered that night in the workshop, surrounded by half-built frames and scattered tools. Fatigue hung heavy in the air, but beneath it was something stronger, a shared determination, almost defiant in its intensity. They had come too far, sacrificed too much, uncovered too many breakthroughs to retreat now. The impossible dream was no longer just an idea. It was a living machine, inches away from rewriting everything the industry believed about what a car could be. But the most difficult test, the moment that would determine whether the dream endured or shattered, was still waiting in the shadows. The most difficult test began long before the car reached the track. It started inside the boardroom, where pressure, ego, and fear collided in a way no engineering simulation could predict. Executives demanded clarity. Was the machine ready, or was the team hiding behind ambition? The chief engineer stood alone at the front of the room, surrounded by charts, prototypes, fractured budgets, and a dream that no one else could truly see. He knew the stakes. One wrong word, and years of work would vanish. In an instant, he argued not with numbers, but with truth. The machine wasn't perfect yet, but perfection was no longer the goal. Innovation was. Progress was. The chance to create something that would redefine the company's identity was worth the remaining risks. Some executives listened with cautious curiosity. Others narrowed their eyes, sensing a gamble they weren't sure they could afford. The room split sharply, tension thick as steel. Outside the boardroom, the engineering team prepared for a make-or-break prototype trial. They reinforced welds, checked sensors, rebalanced the suspension geometry. The car gleamed beneath fluorescent lights, silent and still, like a creature holding its breath. They knew this test would determine everything: funding, future, and faith itself. Failure would end the project. Success could change the automotive landscape. The day of the test arrived with cold air and unforgiving winds. Engineers lined the track, clipboards trembling in their hands. The driver, a veteran who had piloted countless test vehicles, walked to the machine with a solemn expression. He understood the weight he carried. One wrong move could end both the project and his own safety. Yet, he didn't hesitate. He placed his hand on the roof, whispering something only the car could hear. The first lap was cautious. Systems warmed. Tire pressure stabilized. Sensors synced. Then he pushed harder. The car responded like it had been waiting for this moment its entire life. It hugged the corners with astonishing composure. Airflow sculpted itself around the body, exactly as the simulations predicted. The engine, once the project's greatest headache, delivered power with a smoothness that shocked even its creators. But at high speed, a new problem emerged. A faint vibration, small but unmistakable, shivered through the chassis. It wasn't violent, but it was foreign. The telemetry team watched their screens with tightening throats. The vibration grew slightly as speed increased, hinting at a harmonic resonance issued deep in the frame. Left unresolved, it could tear the machine apart under extreme load. The driver eased off, but the damage was done. Doubt spread through the engineers like a cold wind. Had they overlooked something critical? Was the dream unraveling just as it neared reality? Voices cracked over the radios. Suggestions turned into arguments. Fear clawed at the edges of every thought. The breakthrough they sought felt like it was slipping through their fingers. But then, the chief structural engineer spoke softly through the headset. He recognized the vibration, not as a failure, but as a clue. It indicated a flex pattern consistent with the new composite blend they had experimented with only weeks earlier. It wasn't a structural flaw. It was a compatibility issue, a solvable one. The tension softened, replaced by the fragile spark of hope. The team worked through the night, adjusting reinforcement layers, modifying stress pathways, refining the bond points until the composite structure behaved exactly as predicted. When dawn arrived, the car rolled back onto the track with quiet determination. The second test run was different, confident, purposeful, at full speed. The machine remained stable, every component aligned in harmony. And when the driver completed the final high-load maneuver, he returned to the pit wall with a look the team would never forget, a mix of disbelief and awe. "It's ready," he whispered. The data confirmed it. The machine had crossed a threshold that once seemed unreachable. The impossible dream had taken shape. Not perfect, not flawless, but real. Yet the triumph came with a haunting awareness. The final confrontation with leadership was still ahead. And the machine's fate would not be decided by engineering, but by the fragile intersection of politics, ambition, and vision. Everything now hinged on whether the company had the courage to embrace a miracle it never believed could exist. The confrontation unfolded in a crowded boardroom, tense and electric. Executives gathered with guarded expressions, bracing for final verdict on a project they had doubted from the start. The chief engineer placed a single folder on the table, data sheets, performance charts, and a brief written summary of the test results. He didn't bring grand speeches or sweeping promises. He brought proof. For a long moment, no one moved. The hum of the building's ventilation filled the silence. Then the chairman opened the folder. One by one, the executives leaned forward, scanning the numbers that shouldn't have been possible. Stability metrics beyond anything the company had produced, efficiency that defied expectations, performance curves smoother than any prototype in the division's history. With each page turned, the room's skepticism began to crack. Still, doubts lingered. Some executives questioned manufacturing costs, fearing materials required would strain production budgets. Others worried the design was too radical, too unfamiliar to consumers. A few insisted that focusing on an experimental flagship was reckless when the company still struggled with financial instability. The debate intensified, voices rising, caution clashing with ambition. Then the chief engineer spoke. His voice was calm, steady, unshaken by the storm around him. He reminded them of the company's legacy, of the innovation that once defined it, the courage that had built its greatest machines. He explained that the dream behind this car wasn't about chasing luxury or prestige. It was about proving that the company still had the ability to push boundaries, to inspire, to lead. He didn't beg for approval. He asked for belief. The room fell quiet again, not from resistance, but from reflection. The executives realized that the machine was more than a product. It was a declaration that even in an era of crisis, creativity could triumph over fear. That engineering still mattered. That dream still mattered. The vote passed narrowly but decisively. The car would move into limited production. Cheers erupted in the engineering wing as the news spread. Some wept, others embraced. After years of struggle, sacrifice, and doubt, the impossible dream had earned its place in reality. Production began with a reverence usually reserved for works of art. Craftspeople shaped the composite body with meticulous care. Engines were assembled like instruments, each component inspected with almost ceremonial precision. The first completed model rolled out of the factory beneath soft white lights, its contours sharp, its presence undeniable. The team gathered around it in silence, absorbing the meaning of the moment. When the car reached the world, the reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Enthusiasts praised its balance and purity. Critics called it a triumph of engineering elegance. Drivers described it as something rare, a machine that fell alive beneath their hands. Demand surged far beyond the planned limited run, creating a ripple effect throughout the industry. Competitors scrambled to develop new technologies. Designers studied its form. Engineers dissected its architecture, searching for the secret behind its harmony. But its legacy extended beyond performance statistics or consumer demand. It reignited something deeper. The belief that innovation is not about comfort, but about courage. That dreams worth chasing are rarely easy. And that sometimes the most remarkable breakthroughs come from teams who refuse to let the world's limitations dictate their imagination. In the end, the machine built on impossible dreams became a symbol, not just of what a car could be, but of what people can achieve when they dare to push beyond doubt. It stood as proof that the line between impossible and inevitable is often drawn by the choices we make in moments of uncertainty. And long after production ended, its influence remained, echoing in future designs, inspiring new generations of engineers, and reminding the industry that every miracle begins as an idea too bold for the moment it was born. So what do you think? Are we repeating the same mistake again?